So I want to celebrate the path we've walked along the path of this podcast in the last year. Some of this will be, again, I'm not going to go through all 50 plus episodes on the podcast, but there is going to be a little bit of element of just pausing for a second to recognize what were some of those messages and what did we learn by remembering the path we've walked and carrying with us in the present moment and into the future. Here are some that jumped out to me. Welcome back to The Thermostat with Jason Barger. If you're currently on a commute, a walk, or just a micro break in your day, glad you're making time to step back, to think, and to reflect on the next steps on your journey. I've never been more convinced the best leaders and team cultures in the world are the ones that make time to step back, breathe in good oxygen, and calibrate their thermostat. I hope today's conversation leaves you feeling grounded and inspired. Now let's dive into today's topic to engage our minds and hearts in order to authentically lead and create compelling cultures wherever we are in the world. Hey everyone, it's Jason, and welcome back to the Thermostat Podcast, wherever you are and however you're coming to the podcast today. Welcome in. So glad you are here. We are in the wrap-up, the final episode of Season 8, which means we're over 260 episodes now on the podcast. Season 8 that has spanned this whole year has been amazing. So many great topics and guests and just things I'm so grateful for. So if you're a listener out there and you've been a part of this for even beyond this year, then so glad this continues to add value to your life and your work. And I hope it has continued to become an ethic, a part of your practice of spending time thinking about these things and then taking the concepts back to your life and your work. So I'm so glad that there are so many people that have been with this for a long time. For anybody that's new to the podcast, welcome in. So glad you're here. Continues to grow and spread. As I just said, 260 episodes. There's 52 episodes alone just in this past year. So I hope you will check out all of the past things. If you just Google my name and the Thermostat Podcast and whatever topic you're looking for, chances are you're going to find something that hopefully contributes to your life and your work. My commitment to everybody, every time I record one of these podcasts, is I want the topic that we're talking about, I want it to add value and contribute, give you some time to step back and think about the temperature that you're trying to set in your life and your work. And then I hope the topics breathe some good oxygen into you and help you think about things, engage your mind and heart, and say, all right, what is it that I want to do next that will help stimulate progress and help me be the person I want to be and help create the culture with the people around me that I'm aiming to create. So that's the point of all of this, and I hope it is a great thing for you. So before we dive into today's topic, if you'll just do me the quick favor and you'll rate the podcast 5 stars on whatever platform you're using, just smash that 5-star button. If you'll leave an authentic review, whatever your own words about why these topics or a particular topic or these concepts are valuable in the world today, leaving an authentic review is super helpful and really goes a long way to spreading the message to others. And then lastly, if you just share the podcast, so whether that's on social media, if there's episodes that resonate with you or across your team or your organization, say, hey, let's listen to this episode and talk about it. All of those ways help amplify the message and help share it with people. And that's the way it spreads. And so grateful for everybody that takes the time to do that. So thank you. If you know me well, then you know I like to end each year by reflecting on the path that we've just walked before we launch into the phase of the next journey. I'm really excited about Season 9 and what's coming on the podcast in the year ahead. But before we launch there and get to that point, which I know is oftentimes a human tendency, is we just want to launch ahead to whatever's next. But I try to practice this myself, is to slow down and first celebrate, hey, let's hold on, let's not forget all that we've just experienced and all the great things that have happened in the past year and all the things that we want to make sure that we hold on to and remember. And so much has happened in our lives and in the world in the year 2024. And I'm not going to focus so much on that other than to just recognize that for all of us in 2024, there's been a lot that's happened in the world. There's a lot that's going on, good and challenging things. And also the purpose and the point of today's episode is to focus on all of the content and all the messages and all the things that we were lucky to share on this podcast over the last year. And so not only have I become keenly aware of how important it is in my own life and work, but through study and research and firsthand experience with many teams and organizations across industries, we just know that too many places are so focused on the next shiny object and that we don't take the time to appreciate, acknowledge, and remember the core of what we've got going on now, or the core of why we do what we do and the things that we've just experienced. So in personal relationships and certainly our own practice as leaders, but also in the relationships and in our teams and organizations, the concept and the practice of stepping back to recognize, to celebrate, to remember helps breathe good oxygen into all of us so that when it comes to whatever the next step along the journey is in our life and work, we've got energy and ready to do that. But first and foremost, we pause for a second to step back and celebrate and recognize all that we've just experienced. So we will be better at everything we do in the future when we fully appreciate where we are and where we've just been first. So I want to celebrate the path we've walked along the path of this podcast in the last year. Some of this will be, again, I'm not going to go through all 50 plus episodes on the podcast, but there is going to be a little bit of element of just pausing for a second to recognize a little bit of rinse and repeat of what were some of those messages and what did we learn by remembering the path we've walked and carrying with us in the present moment and into the future. Not only with over 50 some episodes this season, I'm not going to go back through every single one of them and every single theme, but I hope that some of these highlights at least jump out to you and maybe even cause all of us. It was really fun for me. Even I'm the one that leads this podcast, and it was even fun for me to go back and look at the whole last year and be reminded of all the topics we've covered. And so this might trigger in you to go back and look back and say, oh, wow, I didn't listen to that one, or yeah, I want to know more about that. And hopefully it'll help us not just launch to the next thing, but also really appreciate all that we already have right now and all that we've just experienced. So I'm going to point out some things that jumped out to me and some episodes that, at least as I look back quickly, some highlights that I'll point out. And again, you may have different ones for you, but here are some that jumped out to me. But before we dive into today's topic, let's pause, take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Many teams and organizations right now are realizing that they need to do both. They need to engage the minds and hearts of their people in person, where everyone in the room can experience the energy of congregating together and find clarity for the road ahead. And they also need to continue to find ways to engage the minds and hearts of their people virtually with those who are working remotely or at a distance. So, if you are in the process of planning your next team meeting, company all-hands event, conference, or culture summit, and are looking for support with a powerful keynote speech, facilitated team conversations that are the currency for change, or deeper development on leadership mindset and an intentional strategy for the culture you're trying to create, I hope you'll contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. It is my privilege and our honor to partner with great people to provide support in these areas. We want to breathe oxygen into your leaders and throughout your organization so you can set the temperature you want for your culture. We look forward to connecting with you soon. I hope you'll contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. It is my privilege and our honor to partner with great people to provide support in these areas. We want to breathe oxygen into your leaders and throughout your organization so you can set the temperature you want for your culture. We look forward to connecting with you soon. So I'm going to point out some things that jumped out to me and some episodes that, at least as I look back quickly, some highlights that I'll point out. And again, you may have different ones for you, but here are some that jumped out to me. When I look at the micropods on this podcast, which, by the way, just to point this out, that's really intentional, that the style of these podcasts and the length of these podcasts is very intentional. I personally have a feeling that I think people want to have some content, a pause, a moment, a time that is realistic for the world that we live in today. Of a 15 to 30 minute kind of is realistic for people to be able to pause and whether that's on a walk or a run or a commute or just taking time to kind of step back and think about something. To have podcasts that go on and on and on for hour and a half, 2 hours, in my opinion, is just not the style. I know I appreciate some of those out there, and you may too, but that's not what I'm aiming for in these. So this kind of micro pod style, I really hope resonates with you and is applicable for you, and in a quick way helps you kind of access the information and the content, but then begin to think about what does it mean for you. And obviously, all of these concepts need a deeper dive. And with many of the teams and organizations that I support or places, events I speak at, we're diving deeper into these topics or these ideas. But hopefully the pod is a way that quickly stimulates your thinking and engages your mind and your heart. So here are some of the themes that jumped out to me. When I look at the micropods throughout this past year, we started out early in the year talking about 3 culture strategies for the new year. And I talked about this idea that organizations in the world that we're in right now, still coming, kind of post-pandemic, but still coming into this new world of figuring out hybrid work. And also just now we're far enough past the pandemic that things are starting to quote unquote normalize, even though we've moved into a new normal in the future of work and organizations. As I talked about, are we being welcoming, and what's the kind of onboarding strategy to how we're bringing people into our culture and retaining great people and attracting great people. We talked about cultural fitness and this idea of kind of working out, and what is it that you're doing on an ongoing basis to help engage with your people. And then thinking about kind of what is our own personal wake. So what are the waves and the ripples that we create by how we show up to do our work? And that episode really resonated with a lot of people, in this kind of thinking about, well, what are our strategies for our team and organization in the year ahead, of how we're onboarding, and what is our ongoing workouts that we're going to plan, and how are we thinking about and making those connections to the ripples we send throughout our organization. I also talked about in an episode about 5 organizational trends that we see on the horizon, and that I was predicting, things that are happening, that even in the midst, talked about 5 trends, like even in the midst of AI, which artificial intelligence continues to grow and spread and is scary to many people, but also is going to be really helpful and interesting in a lot of ways too, and is already being implemented. But that the human touch is always going to be a part of what we do. And so are we keeping those human connections and really that future of human-centered leadership? And I talked about the experience economy, and continually that's how people experience the world and experience their team and their organization, and the leader that's around them is such an important part of their life, let alone the quality of their work, but also leads to whether we retain good people and attract good people. I talked about resiliency and the fact that, we're past the pandemic, but, there are challenges that are happening in the world. And so having the kind of grit and resiliency to keep going and continue to do that is going to be important. I talked about the growing need for better engagement and building trust. A lot of research that's come out that we've been in such a low trusting environment. And I'll talk about that in just a second. But the organizations that are building engagement and trust are ones that are thriving and or are quote unquote winning when others are seeing that kind of revolving door. And then lastly, I talked about hybrid, that it's here to stay, that they're just remote work. We're not, we've realized that many people can be really productive and helpful in that kind of environment. And we're also, each organization is negotiating that for themselves and realizing, when do we need to be in person, and how do we not lose that connection, and how do we get together to have that power in congregation. So that was a really popular and important pod this year. I mentioned trust a minute ago. I did a 4-part series this year on trust. So I won't go through all the parts of it, but, what is trust even? And the fact, again, this research is showing we're in such a low trusting environment where very few people, only 23% of employees, trust their leader and the direction of the organization. So we're in this very low trusting environment. And so what is trust? And how, do we make a decision to trust people? And what are the three main drivers of trust? And how do we then be thoughtful about building trust and engaging with our people? That series was super important and I think helpful to many places, and we've gotten great feedback on. I loved this episode that I did about cultural ecosystem, eco over ego system. Cultural ecosystem over ego system. And we talked about the best practices for teams and culture shaping to create an ecosystem that really helps people grow, brings out the best in people, and is focused on the eco of the system, not the ego of the system. I talked about, there's another episode about redefining accountability, which I think is a really important one and is going to be important in the year ahead. Of this term accountability gets thrown around very loosely in the world and in leadership and cultures. And yet, in my opinion, we don't do a great job of really defining what does true accountability look like and feel like. And there's great opportunity to better understand that and teach and coach that. So that was a really important, I think, episode. We talked about navigating the generational gap and shared some research and study around what is happening right now in the workplace around generational gap and changes in generations in the workforce, and then how do we might approach them. If we aren't thinking about it in unique ways, then we're probably already behind. I shared a personal story about seeing beyond the mental bars and sharing about visiting a guy on death row and talking about, seeing beyond our own mental bars and the constraints we put around ourselves and our team and our organizations. And that was an episode that really, I think, was impactful and personal and vulnerable and resonated with a lot of people. But the message of that, I think, reaches far and wide of the mental and the mindset, the bars that we put around ourselves personally, but also that we do around our teams and organization are significant. And so being aware of those things helps us get better at whatever we're working on into the future. Those are just a few of the micropods that jump out to me. And certainly a lot of the most recent ones also jump out to me. The one I just did about the culture of omotenashi, I think, is really interesting. Anticipation. There's been a lot of great things even just recently. And so I could go on and on and on. There's 52 episodes, so I could, and over 260 episodes again total on the podcast. So I could go on and on and on, but I hope this at least triggers your thinking to go back and check out some of the past episodes just from this year or beyond that may jump out to you. Some of my favorite conversations with guests this year. Again, such a privilege, and I'm so grateful for everybody that joins me as a voice on this guest, friends and colleagues and or people that I, cross paths with and or admire what they're doing. I think about the episode of Love is Stronger Than Hate that I did with my friend Chris Singleton. Not only is his story powerful, and what it means for all of us just as human beings. But what does this mean for the cultures that we're trying to create, where we identify love and connection being stronger than hate and division? I think about the episode I did called Jumpstarting Culture with Eric Stone. And we looked at it really from a what's happening organizationally. What are the best organizations truly doing to shape culture in today's world? I thought that was interesting, and also just affirming for the kind of work that we're doing. Anytime, the lessons from Starbucks, the chat with my great friend and mentor, Howard Bihar. Every time Howard's been on the pod a number of times, and every time that I'm with Howard and or we get a chance to hear from Howard and his experience of growing Starbucks from, barely any stores to 15,000 or whatever it was around the globe before he retired is just amazing. And I always learn something new and experience about his experience of leading and connecting and engaging with people to grow this global brand. And then the other one that comes to my mind is The Theory of Enchantment, most recently, with Chloe Valdery, my friend, and just an inspiring human of thinking about, again, in a divided world, how do we connect people and how do we bring our own baggage we might be experiencing, but not projecting that on somebody else, but thinking about how do we have civil discord and how do we have courageous conversations and how do we stay connected to people even when we might disagree around ideas or beliefs or just our viewpoint on things. So that's been great. at this point in the year, I also love to just pause for a second to celebrate some questions that have come in to the pod. So I'm just picked out 3 that I think represent, things that we ought to think about. I was asked, which of my books do I recommend for the new year with my team? Which, if somebody was diving into one of my books, which one did he recommend for the year ahead with their team? And anytime I'm asked a question like this, it's so hard to answer, because it's like, who's your favorite kid? Like, each of the books that I've written is one that has built upon each other. And so really it's an evolution of my own growing and thinking and just experiences that they all belong. And so it's hard to just pick one. I'll say that, if I just had to riff on each one of them quickly, I would say Thermostat Cultures continues to resonate with anybody out there that's hoping to proactively shape culture. Even if you feel like you've got a great culture, but you want to make it better, that book continues to resonate with people. And so if that's your kind of focus in the year ahead, that'd be a great one. Step Back from the Baggage Claim, my original book, which began this whole kind of journey in this world, continues to resonate with people and especially with people who are looking for perspective. It uses air travel as a metaphor and talks about my journey of spending 7 days living at 7 different airports across the country to write this book as a metaphor for how do we want to move throughout our life and our work, and to step back and have purpose and think about kind of how we want to move, how we want to travel. And so if you're thinking in that way and you want to be kind of returning to that kind of thinking, that would be a great one. And there's a business edition, an education edition, and a healthcare edition, in addition to the original Step Back from the Baggage Claim version. The second book I wrote is called Remember, and is perhaps the least heralded of the books, from just the one that I think the least number of people ask me about, but it's often the one that many people tell me they think might be their favorite or might be the best one. And so, but that's about, in a busy and distracted world, what do we need to remember each day? What's the purpose that we need to remember, but also what's the process we go through to kind of refocus on the things that matter most to us? So that's one that I think is kind of an underrated, sneaky one. And then my most recent book, Breathing Oxygen. If you're thinking about this for the year ahead and thinking about what are the leadership mindsets that we need to breathe into for ourselves to lead in the world today, and also to kind of create the compelling cultures, that would be a great one. That certainly is, if you want to think about what's been happening in the world lately, what are the leadership mindsets that we need, and how do we continue to kind of breathe oxygen into the culture that we want. That one has not only gotten great reviews and all of that, but it's been it's super, super relevant. So. And the most recent one, so it builds on everything. So that's what I would say. Another question that came in: if I, meaning Jason, if I could only listen to one episode from season 8, what would be the one and why? I'll say, wow. Again, hard to answer, but again, there's 52 episodes or some for this last season. But I'd say I loved all the interviews, and I'm just extremely grateful for the powerful people, examples, and great synergy with me and my messages, and people who inspire me, great examples of the work that we're doing within organizations and all that. I love, in addition to that, I also, again, I've said on this podcast, but I love the micropod style of that I hope adds value and contributes in so many ways. Believe it or not, the first one that comes to my mind is an episode that I didn't even acknowledge earlier when I was going through the recap. But the idea of the episode that I did on cultural amnesia, I thought that was really interesting, and I love that terminology. But how we often experience this kind of cultural amnesia in our own lives and within our teams and organizations when we kind of forget the culture that we're hoping to create, that we get far enough down the road in a relationship or on a team or organization, and we start to lose sight of, wait, hold on, we start to have amnesia for, wait a second, this was the type of culture we were committed to, and yet we start to get off track, which happens, all the time. And so what do we do to kind of get back on track and not have that amnesia? That's one that jumps out to me as maybe I'd go back and listen to. And then the last question that came in is just what are my continued observations on how the work world is developing and how this kind of work of developing leaders and cultures is needed, or how does it fit into a very kind of divided and disconnected world that's happened in the last year? And how I'll answer that question is, my observation is, and my experience is, it's as important and as needed as ever, that I still continue to see people that are thirsty for this kind of work, and organizations that if you don't have a strategy around how you're developing your people and your culture and keeping them connected to that clarity of mission, vision, and values, then good luck to you. Because again, we're in such a low trusting environment, and that the level of trust that exists is so, 23% is what Gallup tells us across organizations. So people will go other places and will just leave and won't be there for you and others. And so how we develop people and develop cultures that people want to stay and want to be a part of is, it's not this kind of work. And then I'll stop rambling. But this kind of work is not just an add-on. It ought to be a part of your strategy. And the best organizations in the world are the ones where developing people and culture and this clarity is a strategy. It is a core to what they're doing as an organization. It's not an extra thing. It's one of the main things, because we're going to have people and culture and strategy in order to be good at whatever it is we do. So that's how I would answer that question, and I hope that resonates with you. So anyway, this is an invitation. I know we're at the end of a year. We're at the end of a time when people are hopefully celebrating the year in past, and I hope you'll go back and check out past episodes before we launch forward. The next episode that you're going to hear is in Season 9, where we're going to kick off in the year ahead, and we're going to begin to think about the vision for the future. But before we do that, let's celebrate all the stuff that's happened in the last year and pause and be grateful for all that we've experienced. So I hope you'll go back, listen to those episodes. I hope you'll rate the podcast 5 stars and leave authentic reviews so that other people can find it. I hope you'll share episodes that you don't want to get lost and you want to share with the people in your life or your work, so that, again, you can talk about it and these concepts continue to live on. And I'll just say, again, if any support to you and your team and your organization would be helpful, send us a message, track us down through the website, jasonvbarger.com. Send us an email, info@jasonvbarger.com, and let us know, and we'll try to help support and try to learn what's going on with developing people and culture in your organization and see how we might be able to help. So cheers to you, cheers to this past year, certainly cheers to the road ahead, and remember that the future of leadership is you, is me, is us. We all have a chance and get to think about what is that temperature that we want to set in our life and our work, and then to be courageous enough to breathe good oxygen into ourselves and into others so that we can go create it. And a reminder to all of us, from time to time, we've got to remember to step back, remember, be a thermostat, and breathe good oxygen. Thank you for listening to today's podcast, and I hope the messages and questions stimulate positive change along your path. As always, if these messages resonate with you and add value to your life, I hope you'll help amplify them throughout the world. Please rate, comment, and share on whatever podcast or social media platform you're using, and share this podcast with the people in your life or work who should be part of these conversations. That way, this spirit does, in fact, spread. If these messages or developing leaders and culture would be helpful to you and your organization, please contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. And remember, we are all ambassadors for the culture we want to create in our life and work. We have to own the vision we want to be a part of. The future of leadership is you, is me, is us. Be a thermostat.